Welcome to Exceptional Leadership. I'm your host, Anita Brooks. Though my focus is primarily pointed to leadership at an organizational level, let me assure you, most of what I share will translate to almost any aspect of life. Just tweak the info to fit your leadership role. Because whether you approach my content as a corporate leader, middle manager, small business owner, entrepreneur, or as a family member or friend, you are influencing someone. The question is, are you influencing well, exceptionally well? So let's take courage, exercise wisdom, and humbly invest in the people we are called to influence. Join me on a quest, not for perfection, but absolutely for exceptional leadership. Well, listeners, if you have any leadership role at all, and you already know my take on that, then you probably can relate to the juggle and struggle of leadership sometimes. That balancing act where we're trying to take care of either the day job or the business that we've started and our family. And then let's not even talk about friend relationships and being involved in the community and all of those things that tug on us for attention and time. So today I want to delve into what that looks like and feels like. And I want to talk about maybe some time management strategies and what we say to ourselves, as well as I often talk about, like the importance of self-care. We have to take care of ourselves as leaders before we're able to take care of someone else. So today I am joined by a guest, Sandra Flach, and this lady, talk about the juggle and struggle. She's got a lot going on. So Sandra, welcome to Exceptional Leadership.
Hey, Anita, thank you so much for having me.
It is my pleasure. So Sandra, tell us a little bit about what you do in your life. And I'm going to kind of chuckle as I say that because I know there's a lot, and which, by the way, is pretty typical for a lot of women in leadership. Now, I'm not taking anything away from men, but let's face it, even in the 21st century, still, oftentimes we women are the ones who will make the appointments, make sure people get to their appointments, provide the ticklers and reminders, and not only have to take care of our own selves, but a lot of other people around us. And yes, men have to take care of other people too, but it just seems like on both professional and personal level, we women, we put a lot on our shoulders.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. I'm first and foremost a wife. My husband and I just celebrated 35 years.
Congrats.
Thank you. And we have 8 children. I can imagine everyone's jaw dropping. We have 3 children biologically, and then we adopted 5. We did one kinship. She was a relative. Way back in the olden days of 1999, she came to live with us when she was 8 years old. And then we went on to adopt a sibling set of 4 from Ukraine. So I got used to juggling a lot of things all at one time. We were also a homeschool family for a time. But a few years after all of our kids came home, I established a nonprofit, Justice for Orphans. And in the early days, that mission was to rally the faith-based community to step into adoption, foster care, to just get involved in some way when I became aware of the number of children in the foster care system in the United States, which is up near 400,000 kids. And then globally, the millions of orphans. I just began to talk and tell our story, and people were listening. And the next thing I knew, I was getting speaking opportunities, lots of different places and on the radio. And so we birthed our organization, which is called Justice for Orphans, just really to advocate and to speak and to share. And then that led to a radio show for a time, which is now my Orphans No More podcast. And then the organization began to grow, and we established a program called Care Portal back in 2018, which plugs in communities, churches, businesses, individuals, community folks to meet the needs of children and families in crisis. So we partner with county social service agencies, CPS, Child Protective Services, caseworkers identify needs of kids and enter them into our care portal, which is an online platform. And it goes out to community champions and churches and folks to meet these needs and really have an opportunity to step in, build relationship, and change lives. And we've so far in just a couple of counties in my upstate New York community, we've served over 2,300 children.
Wow.
Since 2018. We're expanding into other counties. So we'll be in 4 counties as of June of 2022 here. So as the organization has grown, I've been finding myself extremely busy. Currently, I said we have 8 kids. 2 are home. The rest are out of the house, married. We have 5 grandchildren, 2 on the way, actually. But the 2 kids that are still home are teenage boys, which are kind of scary in general, but they also have developmental disabilities. So a lot of work goes into raising them and kind of keeping them on track. The youngest is 16, and I found myself post-COVID having to homeschool him because he really struggled with things going on at school and all the different changes and challenges. So wasn't planning on adding that to my already overfull calendar and plate, but have been homeschooling him. This is the 2nd year of his homeschooling for high school, but that really consumes the first half of my day, and then I find myself having to pile everything else into the last half of the day, which makes for very busy days. So time management and priorities are a real challenge and a real struggle, and something I work on every day.
Boy, so much of what you said I can relate to. For one, just raising children, talk about a leadership opportunity, but also leadership challenges, because we're shaping the lives of tomorrow's leaders. And so it's something that's a very honorable task, but it can feel daunting when you are in that leadership role. But also your heart for helping those who are in foster care, that I just have to tell you, it really, well, it just connects with me. So one of my give backs that I'm working on right now, I haven't even publicized this and didn't plan to, but I'm just going to say it here, is I'm working with my state in Missouri to develop some forums to help teach children in foster at a younger age some of these important leadership and life skills that they're not getting in the school systems and they're not getting in the foster system. And I'm not blaming anybody. I mean, those poor workers who are investing their lives to try to help save these children are stretched so thin. The resources are so sparse. And so I'm looking for something I can do to help to support them and to provide another resource that takes some of the pressure off of them. So when I hear you talk about all of the things that you've accomplished, it gives me hope, and it's something that I can relate to, and it encourages my heart. So thank you so much for what you do, Sandra.
Thank you. Really, I see it as a calling, and just try to be obedient to walking out that calling each day. Not perfectly. I'm learning as I go, but really I'm thrilled that I get to do what I get to do.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this. So give us what a typical morning might look like for you, Sandra, because my imagination is running wild at the moment.
So the typical morning, it could be different every day because, like I said, I have boys that have brain-based disability, but I rise early. I've done this for many, many, many years, and especially when we had all 8 kids at home. Sort of my survival strategy was to get up before they do, when the house is quiet, have my cup of coffee, have some quiet time, read. I like to start my day with prayer and just really focus on just that time and get myself really, my brain ready, prepare myself for, okay, this is the day ahead. This is what needs to be done. Set those priorities and just really relish the quiet before the chaos. Because when you have 8 kids or when you have 2 or even 1, there can be chaos as soon as they wake up.
Let me stop you right there. Okay. Yeah. Just because that is so good. And it's so relatable to anyone in a leadership position. So even if you don't have children, but let's say that you're in a leadership role in a business or say a large not-for-profit organization, when you go to work and you're leading people, it really is somewhat like parenting. And so just like parents have to sometimes get creative about where and how they refill their cup, so do those in those high pressured leadership positions. And it's interesting to me in all of the leaders that I work with, how few of them either understand the benefit of quiet time, like you just described, especially if you start your day early that way, or even if they understand the benefit, act on it, actually do something with what they know. And yet a few years ago, I was studying like habits of billionaires. It's just one of those weird, quirky things that I'm interested in. Like, what do they have in common? What are their patterns? What makes them different from some of the rest of us? And do you know what the number one habit is of billionaires that they all have in common, Sandra?
No, I don't.
They rise early. No matter how late they're up the night before, most billionaires rise 6 a.m. or earlier. So what you just described is actually a great billionaire strategy, but although you're doing it just for your own self-care and self-sustaining method, I would think, just to get through the day. But I just thought that was so relevant to any type of leadership person, to make sure that we carve out that quiet time. And don't be afraid of the quiet. Be all right sitting in solitude and to pray or meditate. Do something that's going to refill you so you have that strength and endurance to face the rest of your day. So I apologize for interrupting, but that was so good.
Yeah, well, and I agree. You said we need to refill our cup. We can't pour out from an empty cup. So I find that time in the morning that's where I refill. And whether you're having to pour out to children that you're raising or a business and your employees of your business, your staff, you're not going to be able to really adequately pour out with excellence. If you want them to get the best of you rather than the very cranky, I woke up late, I'm just barely dragging in part, it really takes recharging our own batteries, taking care of ourselves so that we feel good, we feel up to the task, and we're ready to start the day. I feel like my kids would have all fled the scene if I, woke up, and not that I woke up in a perfect mood every morning, but just having that time to set the day has really been a lifelong. I've been doing it for probably 30 years, since I started parenting. And I still do it. And I find that it's the most important part of my day.
Yeah. And it's also a time of day when you can think strategically. Your brain cells are fresh. You've gotten up in the morning and, some people are coffee drinkers. Some people are tea drinkers. Some people maybe soda, but whatever it is, having that habit where you get up and you have this routine where you spend quiet time and you reflect and you meditate or pray, and then go into that time where you're strategizing about the day, the week, or the month, or the year. That really sets you ahead of so many people because you're starting the day with intentionality. And I think that's too often missed in at least the American culture today. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I believe that because I think, especially in the American culture today, so often one of the first things that we do when we open our eyes is we open our phones, right? We go right to that device. We have to check the email. We have to check the social media. We have to check the news headlines. And I'm guilty of that too, because sometimes when I'm getting up, I'll hear a ding and I'll be like, what's that? Did that email finally come through? And it's such a distraction. And it's such a time sucker because before I know it, if I reach for those things first, before I know it, the time has just gone, and then I've used up a good portion of that quiet time, and it's time to start my day. And then I feel like I'm starting behind. So that's something that I have to guard very much and not turn on any device before I have that quiet time and I'm ready to start my day. That is vital. And I've also found that over the years, it's in that quiet time that I feel like I've gotten the strategies, or I've gotten the next, you have that creative time. And for me, I just feel like, because I'm a person of faith, that's the time where I feel like God has birthed some ideas, whether it was adopt these kids, start this organization, do this next thing, connect with this person, whatever it is. I feel like when I have that quiet time, that solitude, I can hear and think more clearly. And then I'm able to take next steps and put those things into practice. But some of the biggest things, I feel like some of the most important things I've ever done really came out of that quiet time.
I know the same is true for me too. In my experience, I am so grateful for the intentionality to be quiet, to sit still in silence, because there are ideas and, as you said, even callings that I have felt like have been birthed in those moments that I would have missed. In my hurried and harried, rushed life, I would have passed those opportunities by, and I sure would have missed out on some amazing things in life. So, and as I hear you talk about that, and you shared about feeling a calling to adopt and then even to start this not-for-profit. When I imagine that, I know for me, I would probably feel a mixture of excitement and fear, maybe even terror, at being, feeling drawn to do something like that. Did you have any of that kind of emotional reaction?
Yes, because I find most often when we feel called to something, it's something that we really can't do on our own. It's always these impossible things, like, who just decides to adopt? We already had 3 children. Who just decides to go do an international adoption. And I tell the whole story and how that all unfolded in my book, but it was quite the journey. And if I'd have known all of the ups and downs right away in the beginning, we probably would have chickened out and not done it, because we have 4 children. And like I said, the youngest 2 have some disabilities. So, they're not going to be flying the nest anytime in the near future, in one of them, if ever. So it's a long-term commitment. But as we've walked that out, just knowing from that time I've spent just getting that calling, and knowing that it's a calling, being able to walk that out in faith, and just trusting that this was what was birthed in my heart. I know this is what I'm supposed to do. We're just going to trust, and we're going to take those steps. But it's always been crazy things. Like I was a guest on a radio show, which I did with much fear and trembling, because at the time public speaking was not something I was interested in doing. I tried to avoid being a guest on this person's radio show, but she was very persistent. And finally I gave in and just figured I'll just do it, and then I'll never have to do that kind of thing again. And she called me for a second interview, and then the radio station asked me to host a radio show where I could talk about adoption and foster care and orphans and all of that stuff every week. And I just thought, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard, because I have zero experience with radio, broadcasting or any of that. I barely can figure out how to turn the radio on, let alone have a radio show. But clearly early on, we had just established our nonprofit. Our mission was to engage the faith community. This was a Christian radio station that approached us, and we felt like, well, this isn't something we would have come up with on our own. This is clearly a door God is opening. So we stepped through and hosted that show for a number of years until we became a full-fledged podcast. The particular radio station we were on was a talk radio station. They sold their airspace to a music station, so everybody had to find new places for their programs. We were already duplicating ours as a podcast, and now we're a full podcast. But it was a crazy thought. We would have never thought, let's go have a radio show. But one step in front of the other, and just going through the doors that open is really one of my strategies to success. Is if that door opens, I'll trust what's on the other side and step through. And that's how we ended up with 8 kids and a nonprofit and a radio show, and just doing, like I said, doing the things that I get to do, which I'm so honored to be able to do. but I would have never set out to do on my own.
Well, and talk about changing lives. I mean, you are changing many lives on a regular basis. It's so beautiful. So tell us a little bit about what it was like starting a not-for-profit. Like that just sounds overwhelming to me. Were there any surprises, or like if you could go back to yourself at the point where you were just beginning the process, what advice would you give you for starting a not-for-profit?
Oh my goodness. What advice would I give? I don't know, because starting out, you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe as I answer this, the answer will actually come to me. But we started really just as, a mom with a passion. I always tell everybody my gift is the gift of gab. Like I talk, and that's what I do. So telling my story everywhere is what opened up opportunities to speak on this and to be on the radio. And it just sort of kind of started as a little mission through my church. But as we got the radio show and more speaking, it became clear that it wasn't just like a church-based ministry. This was a standalone organization. So it took time, but I learned that I needed to gather people around me, which became our board of directors, people who had skill sets that we would need to move the organization forward. So I got to learn that whole process as we, established. We had to incorporate and go through the whole process to become a nonprofit, and bylaws and all of that kind of thing that I knew nothing about, but I gathered people around me who did know those things. And then just sticking with the mission and following that over time. And like I said, in the early days, we were just really advocacy. We were hosting some conferences. We were trying to recruit foster parents, all that kind of thing. But then when we realized we really also wanted to be boots on the ground and make an impact in our local community with children who are in foster care or children who are at risk of entering foster care. And that's why when we discovered Care Portal, we established that here in upstate New York in 2018, and just started growing our team. I've had to learn to be a leader because I was a mom. Honestly, I was a full-time mom, homeschooled my kids, had no experience in any of the above, but just had a calling and a faith to it'll work out. I'll know what to do when I need to do it. The right people will come along. And, now I have to do things that I don't really like to do, which is fundraise and raise money and ask people for money. And that's a big part of being an executive director of a nonprofit, grant writing, just things I never thought I would ever do. And certain things I don't like to do because I would rather just speak in front of people and talk and share the story and encourage people and tell our story and get people involved. But I have to do all of these other parts as well. So assembling a good team that you can work with around you, mm-hmm. who have the skills that they can bring to the table that, I certainly don't claim to have all of the answers. And I have another leader of a nonprofit on our board, just, folks that can contribute and can advise as we go, has led to a lot of growth. But, just trying to do what I do with excellence and with humility and not that pride, because I know, like is it Maxwell who said, people don't care about, how much you know until they know how much you care, mm-hmm. something along those lines. Mm-hmm. And so I know that as I'm growing my team for our nonprofit, and this is a nonprofit that still does not have a payroll. We have a couple contracted out workers who contribute their professional services to us. But this has been with a lot of volunteers. But now, as a nonprofit, we've had such growth. We actually now have to establish a payroll and sustain one and apply for grants and do all those kind of businessy things that I've never thought of myself. I'm like a really poor business person because really I just want to give it all away.
But you know what? A smart leader understands their weaknesses as well as their strengths. They acknowledge them, they accept them, and then they take whatever action is necessary to fill the gaps. So they're not so arrogant or proud to think that they have to try to do everything themselves and micromanage, but instead they are willing to find people who have strengths that they don't have and to build and create a team from that. They encourage the team members and they allow team members to do their work unfettered without that leader getting in the way. They also are not afraid to have oversight. You mentioned a board. That's a very important aspect of business. And I think, I am a board member actually on multiple boards. And it's one of those misunderstood, I think, roles often that people have. But your job is to have that kind of 30,000 foot view. You're not supposed to have your finger in day-to-day operations, but you are responsible for making sure that the day-to-day operations are operating well, that they're the right decisions that are made for the organization. But you having that insight and understanding to make sure that you put the oversight in place and that you're teachable. You're willing to learn from your board members. I would imagine you are willing to learn from the team members who have the skill sets that you don't. And that humility and that teachability on your part actually makes you organically a naturally exceptional leader, because so many in leadership positions don't exercise those traits and they end up undermining themselves and they weaken their own leadership abilities without even realizing it, because they're trying to grip so many things with so much pressure. And it ends up breaking people around them and breaking processes and systems. And sometimes it can break the organization overall.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I've also come to this looking at it as, Sandra Flach maybe established this organization and I'm the executive director of it and I'm overseeing it, but I don't want the organization to die when I no longer am here to be the leader of it. So knowing that you have to have that succession plan, right? As we've grown, now we sort of have departments. So we have a care portal department, and then I host the podcast. And a big part of my heart is to encourage and equip adoptive and foster parents, because I am an adoptive and foster parent, and I know how difficult the journey is. And with my podcast, I encourage and equip. And we have some trainings and some classes and different things that we want to roll out. And it lines up. The mission of JFO is to inspire, educate, and equip. So I talked about Care Portal, the boots on the ground part of the work. That's our equipping communities to be able to care for children and families in crisis. But as part of in our podcast Inspires, but the educational part of what we do is the trainings for foster and adoptive parents. And that's really my calling. I love to teach. I love to train. I love to encourage and talk, as you can tell. So as we've expanded and as things are growing, I've needed to grow the team, because I can't wear every hat and do it all. And I don't claim to know how to do it all. So I've been very, very grateful that we've been slowly adding to our team. And it seems like the right people kind of come along when we need them, because I know I can't do it all. And if this organization is going to be sustaining and continue on long after I'm doing it, I want to make sure that we're putting systems in place, and that there is an organization to hand off to the next leader, because I certainly don't have all the answers, and I want it to continue.
Well, and you mentioned a couple of times now the mission and vision of the organization. And mission statements, vision statements have become almost rote, almost cliche to people now. And I find this oftentimes whenever I'm first called in to do a business coaching scope. And so I will often ask the executive leadership team first, so what's your mission statement? And you'll see the almost panic looks that they give each other, the faces blushing red. Some of them will stammer and try to repeat what they can recall of it. But often, people will have these half to full page mission statements. And I always tell people, you cannot remember all of that. You need to keep your mission simple enough for people to remember so that they can actually apply it and take action on it. So I first teach people how to drill down and find out what the heart of their mission is. But you've done that so well. You have a very simple mission statement, but not only have you created it, you didn't create it and put it on a plaque somewhere or put it in a frame and so where it gathers dust and just every once in a while somebody like brushes the dust off of it, but you actually use your mission statement. Your organization lives by the mission statement. And that's the purpose of a mission statement. I tell businesses and organizations all of the time, if you are not going to truly use that mission statement, don't waste your time and energy trying to create one. It's only as good as what you do with it. And so I love the fact that you are so passionate about following that mission that you and your team have identified.
Yeah, and that at the end of the day, make sure that only what's on the table, what we're putting our time and our efforts into, lines up with our mission. Because if not, we're wasting our time chasing things that don't really apply to who we are and what we're doing, and that takes away from what we are supposed to do and what we're called to do. So, like I said, our mission statement is to inspire, educate, and equip individuals, businesses, and churches throughout New York State. That's where we're based in New York State, to play a role in caring for vulnerable children and families. And so our, it's kind of like, and on our website, we inspire, educate, and equip, and everything that we do comes under one of those three headings. And that's where we focus. And if somebody approaches us about doing something else and it doesn't really fall into one of those three categories, then we know it's not something that we're called to do, because there's a lot of great things to do out there, but that doesn't mean we can do all of them. We don't even have the capacity to do all of that. But we have to stay focused on what the mission is, and that's when we're the most successful.
Well, and when you have a mission statement that really works and that you work it like you are, that also becomes a very valuable time management tool, because it keeps you from going off on rabbit trails that frankly are going to lead to places that don't align with your mission. But when you keep that mission in the forefront of your thinking, when you use it as an evaluator to evaluate, should I make this decision or that one? Should I go this direction or the other? Then it keeps you more on that straight and narrow and heading toward the destination that you want to arrive at.
Absolutely. It's really what guides the whole, drives the whole train, right? And that keeps us focused. And it really is the outline for what we do. We're right now going through a website update, and we've had to sit down and look, okay, so as we look at inspire, educate, and equip, what comes under those three categories? Can that be a button? And if you click on inspire, what are you going to get? What's the drop down? And our podcast lands under the drop down. My blog is under that drop down, because we're inspiring individuals and families to step into this space of adoption and foster care and kinship care. So it makes it easy for other people to understand who we are and what we do, and to find what they need when they go to our website. And it keeps us focused with our day-to-day activities.
And I would think it also makes your marketing and your promotional materials clearer as well, because I would think that you would put those through that filter as well to see that everything's aligned with the mission.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Anita.
So tell me a little bit, as you have went through this whole journey, one of the things that I'm such a proponent of focusing on is our self-talk. So what we say to ourselves, well, number one, it's the primary, highest volume conversation we ever have. It has the most influence of any other conversation that we ever have. And yet so many times we don't really pay attention to the messages that are rolling through our brains. So tell me a little bit about your self-talk. Like, have there been times where you started listening to emotional lies and you caught yourself? Or are there some tips you might give us for how you use positive self-talk to sustain you and help you in that juggle and struggle of leadership? What does self-talk mean to you?
Well, there was a time where I was very insecure, very shy, and that really was a stumbling block for any kind of progress. And my faith has played a huge role in overcoming that, because I started to realize, well, I am not who I was, or I am not, the sum of my fears, my inadequacies, my poor self-image, all of those things that we can berate ourselves, the comparison trap that women especially, I think, often fall into. But as I grew in my faith and realized, wait a minute, God created me. He's given me this calling on my life. And as I step out in faith and follow him and walk that out, he's provided and equipped and really has unfolded all of these things. So I think it can be easy, especially for women to, have a lot of negative self-talk. But I've encountered, times where something bad will happen, or there'll be an issue, and I can come down hard on myself, or I can start believing what somebody else maybe was saying negatively about me. For me, it's knowing who I am in Christ, and that I have a calling, and I'm going to walk that out in obedience, not in perfection. I want to learn. I want to grow. I want to lift up others along the way. And so I found I have to be careful, because at times I can feel, especially parenting, like I said, 2 teenage boys with brain-based disabilities. It can be a very stressful day. My quiet time in the morning starts out beautifully, and then, come to the breakfast table and it's over, right? So it can be very hard to, go throughout the day. We're in a season right now where my husband and I, most of our peers are empty nesters, and my husband is looking forward to retirement in a few years, but I can't go to the grocery store or visit my dad in the nursing home, which I need to do once a week, or go to a meeting without my husband coming home from work and staying home with one of our youngest son, who we don't, even though he's 16, we don't leave him home alone for any length of time. So it can be very, I have to be careful, because there are some days, if I look at the comparison, my peers, I have a friend who I haven't seen since high school graduation, and she and her husband are empty nesters, and they just moved across country to Texas and bought a beautiful home, and they're hiking, and they're, seeing the sights, and they're going out to dinner, and they're having all this wonderful time. And I'm like, I don't even know if we're ever going to be able to just have that freedom to do that, because we're, raising these boys, and if we try to go away with them for the weekend, we end up having to come home early because of something or other. So, it's trying to not, oh, woe is me, because I know this is my calling. So when I have a right mindset and a right attitude, because I'm taking care of myself, and I'm making sure I have that time in the morning, and I'm, listening to positive things and reading, good books, and getting encouragement from other moms who are on similar journeys, who get it, then I can have the right perspective and the right self-talk. But if I start comparing myself to people who their lives are completely different from mine, I'm not comparing apples to apples. My friend from high school, she had 1 or 2 kids, and they're grown up out of the house, married, and have their own career and live in a different part of the country. That's her life. That's not my life. And I wouldn't want her life, because I love my 8 children and my 5 grandchildren. And I love even parenting the children that I'm still parenting at home. And it's hard, but it's rewarding and it's good. And this is what I'm called to. So I also make sure I take time in the morning. I keep a gratefulness journal. And every morning, even on the hardest days, I will record things that I'm grateful for. Even if it's just the hot cup of coffee, even if it's just I actually slept through the night, whatever I can find each day that I'm grateful for, that I'm thankful for, it keeps that positive self-talk. Because if I start looking other places and comparing, I can start feeling sorry for myself and start feeling cranky with my husband when he gets home. And it just kind of spirals downward from there. So it's focusing on gratitude, I have to say, having that quiet time, and not comparing myself to anybody else who's not walking in my shoes.
And it sounds like you and I practice a lot of the same very positive exercises. And I love that because they work. That quiet time in the morning, for me, I'm a Bible reader as well. I love just getting in there and getting that inspiration. I love to read self-help books and leadership development books and marketing books. I'm a little bit of a geek about those kinds of things. They interest me. But anything that's going to help me improve my life, expand my knowledge, and then making that decision to act on what I learn, that it has been a massively helpful endeavor through the years. Expressing gratitude, that's so powerful, and yet so few people do it, Sandra. So in this last segment, I'm so glad that you brought that up because, for me, sometimes it's just, I'm in the shower and I just thank God for running water and hot water. I am grateful for that cup of coffee. I'm grateful I can walk on my own two legs to go get that cup of coffee. And sometimes I'm grateful for the dishes because you know what? That means I have a home and I have a family. And we sometimes forget, especially in leadership, when we've got so many things tugging on us, but we forget to express gratitude for those things that we sometimes complain about that really are gifts. So, Sandra, thank you. This has been such a joy. And I would love for you to share with our listeners how they can find out more about you and your mission and your book.
Oh, I would love to share that. So you can find out more about me at my website, which is just sandraflach.com. You can order my book there if you'd like a signed copy. Of course, the book is available wherever you get books. So the name of the book is Orphans No More, A Journey Back to the Father. It is a memoir about our family's adoption journey, why we adopted, how that all played out, and what we learned from that experience. I also share in the last chapters about what I learned about my own spiritual adoption as a child of God through the lens of being an adoptive parent. And everything that I've been talking about our nonprofit can be found at justicefororphansny.org.
Wonderful. And the last name you spell Flach, correct?
Correct.
I just want to make sure our listeners understand that. Thank you so much, Sandra. This has been very, very good. So many insightful things have come from this conversation, and I deeply appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity, Anita. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
That's awesome. And listener, for you, I just want to remind you, as I always do, that exceptional leadership is a choice. But today I want to specifically camp on gratitude. You've heard us talk about this here at the end. So I want you to remind yourself what you have to be grateful for. Nothing's too silly. I remember one time one of my things was, I'm grateful for pistachio ice cream. You know what? I meant that. But what authentic gratitude can you express? And then if you want to light up those that you lead, express gratitude to them. Thank them not only for what they do, but for who they are. And when you do that, I promise you'll make a difference and it will raise the bar on your exceptional leadership. Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Anita Brooks. And I just want to remind you of a truth. If you are not leading at the level that you want to be at, remember, it is never too late for a fresh start with fresh faith. You can start today. You can start making a difference. You can help the world become a better place. You can begin to lead with intent. Your family, your friends, the people you work with, your community, in your church, in our nation, across the planet. Whatever opportunities come your way, remember that did not happen by accident. And by stepping up and leading exceptionally well, you will help fulfill the purpose you were created for.